a man who had lost his voice, lost his confidence, lost his fire. But what they didn't realize was that his silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. It wasn't silence, it was the sound of something new being built inside of him. Piece by piece, brick by brick, while the world kept talking, he was rebuilding, and not for. Now, not to prove a point, not for validation, but for the man in the mirror who had been through hell and refused to let it define him. He had been too loud for too long, explaining himself to people who never cared, proving himself to those who doubted, him defending his heart to those who only ever came to break it. He had spent years pouring himself out, hoping someone would notice the fire in his chest, the dreams in his bones, the storm behind his smile, but all they saw was a man they could use and leave behind, a man they could silence without consequences. But what they never expected was that silence would become his greatest weapon. There came a moment where he stopped arguing, stopped reacting, stopped giving energy to people who only drained it. And when he fell quiet, they didn't know what to do, because they had always controlled the story with their noise, their lies, their opinions. But when he stepped back, when he chose solitude over approval, when he walked away without saying a single word, that's when everything began to shift. That's when the power started to return, not through rage, not through revenge, but through discipline, through stillness, through becoming someone they could no longer reach. He started to wake up early, not because he had to, but because the silence of the morning became his sanctuary. He trained harder, not to impress anyone, but to rebuild the pieces they had shattered. He read more, learned more, studied more, not for applause, but because knowledge became the armor that protected his heart. He sat alone, not because he was broken, but because solitude became the soil in which his future would grow. And every time they asked why he changed, he said nothing, because they were never meant to understand his evolution. They were only meant to witness the result of life. Remembered everything, the conversations, where they laughed at his dreams, the moments when they turned their backs, when he needed them the most, the days when he begged for someone to stay and they walked away without looking back, the betrayal, the judgment, the rejection, all of it stored in the deepest chambers of his heart, not as hatred, not as vengeance, but as fuel, because pain, when used correctly, becomes power, and silence, when embraced, becomes clarity. And that's what he found in the quiet, a clarity so pure, drowned out every lie they ever told him. No longer needed the stage, he no longer needed the spotlight, because he realized that real power doesn't beg to be seen. It speaks for itself in how you walk, how you carry yourself, how you show up when no one is watching. He no longer argued with fools, no longer defended his worth, no longer tried to fix people who were committed to misunderstanding him, because his silence became sacred, and in that sacred silence, he found strength that no voice could give. Him, they said he changed, and they were right, but not in the way they imagined. He didn't become cold, he became cautious. He didn't become rude, he became reserved. He didn't become bitter, he became better. And every scar, they left every wound, they ignored every tear, they dismissed, became a reminder that he could survive anything and rise through everything, not with noise but with presence, not with rage but with peace, not with approval but with purpose. He used to believe that silence meant weakness, that quiet meant broken, that stillness meant lost. But now he knows silence means focus, quiet means power, and stillness means strategy. Because when you stop talking, you start listening. When you stop defending, you start observing. When you stop chasing, you start building. And that's exactly what he did. While they were busy talking, he was building. While they were busy judging, he was preparing. While they were busy leaving, he was learning how to stand alone and still win his. Silence became his rebellion, not against them, but against the version of himself that once needed their validation. The version of himself that once begged to be loved, accepted, understood. That version is gone buried in the ashes of every night. He cried alone and rose again before the sun came up. And now he doesn't need anyone to see his pain, because he carries it like a crown, not a curse. And every time he walks into a room with calm eyes and a quiet heart, they feel it. They feel the difference, because the loudest one in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest one is the one who doesn't need to be loud anymore. He knows now that real strength is invisible, that real battles are fought in silence, that real growth happens in darkness, where no one claps and no one sees and no one says thank you. And yet you keep going, not for attention, but for redemption, not for followers, but for freedom. And that's why he kept walking through the shadows without looking back, without explaining, without justifying, because he realized that some people are only meant to be lessons, not lifelines. Some moments are only meant to break you, so you can finally rebuild on a stronger foundation. He became a man of few words, not because he had nothing to say, but because not everyone deserves access to his voice. Anymore, he chooses silence, not out of fear, but out of power, because now he understands that a lion doesn't need to roar to be respected. It only needs to walk with presence, and his presence now speaks louder than any words he ever said. They wonder how he changed so much. They wonder how he became so calm, so distant, so untouchable. And the truth is, he didn't change overnight. It happened slowly, painfully, silently, in the cracks of broken nights, in the quiet after, heartbreak, in the stillness of solitude, in the echoes of every goodbye that was never explained. And now he no longer seeks closure, because he gave that to himself. He no longer seeks validation, because he proved it to himself. He no longer explains himself, because he understands that those who truly care don't need an explanation, and those who demand one never really cared. No. When he walks differently, not with arrogance, but with assurance, not with pride, but with purpose, not with noise, but with presence. And when he speaks with weight, not volume, because every word now carries the weight of every moment. He chose silence when he could have screamed. Every moment he chose growth when he could have broken. Every moment he chose peace when he could have picked war. And if you ask him today what changed, he won't give you a speech. He won't write a post. He won't tell you stories. He'll just smile, because some journeys are too sacred to be spoken about. Some rises are too personal to be shared. Some transformations are meant to be felt, not explained. And when you look in his eyes now, you'll see it, not the pain, but the power, not the weakness, but the wisdom, not the hurt, but the hunger, because his silence wasn't weakness. It was the start of his rise. And now that he's risen, he doesn't need to be loud about it. He just needs to keep moving forward, quietly, powerfully, unshakably, because the ones who rise in silence are the ones you never see coming until they've already arrived.